And this is part 2 of, I think we'll be doing 3 parts. So part 2 of our Jailbreaking the Goddess interview between Hannah J. Pierce and myself, Lasara Firefox Allen.
Hey, Lasara.
Hi.
Hi. Welcome back. So we were talking a little bit about praxis, and we were talking about politics, and how, as you were writing the book, you felt like stories from Rwanda coming into your world, and stuff about like the Black Lives Matter movement, like you were pulling all of these threads in globally as you're sitting and doing this sort of deep spiritual work of finding, basically finding a language for exploring the feminine divine.
Yes.
Which was really powerful, and which you needed to do in isolation, and, blood was let.
Right.
Tears were shed. Right. It was a process. I wanted to talk a little bit about the political dimension of this book, because you make no bones about the fact that part of this process is, opening up the definition of what it is to be a woman. Like, that's been too narrow, and it's been too biologically determined.
And also, and additionally defined by the masculine.
By the patriarchy.
Yes,
yeah.
By the patriarchy. Yes.
Right. And I mean, really, that's just the beginning of the political nature of the work, because then you're also using intersectionality to talk about, like, matters of sexuality and identity and, cultural appropriation and
race.
Yeah. And indigenous peoples. And it's really interesting, because I think a lot of times people feel like they can separate, like, well, I feel this politically, but I feel this spiritually. For example, Tim Kaine was just talking in the vice presidential debate about how he personally believes that abortion shouldn't be legal, but that legally he feels that it's his job to uphold the law of the land, whatever. He's a politician, he's not an activist or whatever.
Right.
But it's interesting, because people do feel like they can distinguish somewhat. And you seem to be arguing in this book that no, if we're going to be right with ourselves spiritually, we also need to be right with ourselves politically and as activists. And we sort of kind of need to put our spiritual money where our mouths are.
I believe so. So my question for people, and I get, like, if you're elected to political office, and we actually do want, theologically liberated society as much as possible, which we don't have, but we'd like to have. Yeah. Then it is necessary to have some, the separation between church and state is a real thing. However, as people in, with lives who are, and I'm going to say as women who are part of communities, who are, aunties and mothers and grandmothers and sisters and all of the things that we are to each other, friends and lovers, and all of those relational capacities, and relationality is a huge part of jailbreaking. That as we come into our relational, I'm going to say our relational nature, or the relational nature of, community, that our political and sociological leanings really do matter. And for us to say that they don't is, I think, missing the mark. And so a thing that jailbreaking brought me, that I'm bringing out into the world, is the question: does your spiritual reality meet up with your sociological and political values?
Right.
Do your myths fit your beliefs?
Right.
And if they don't, then why are you adhering to them? So, like, as an example, right, we have the monotheisms. We all know people do the thing where they're like, well, this part of Christianity works for me. Be kind to your neighbor, love each other as yourself, there but for the grace, all the good values, do unto others, et cetera, right? That all of that really works for me. The part where it says that homosexuality is a sin, I don't believe that. So I'm going to squint and I'm going to look at it sideways and I'm going to twist it around and say, well, what it's really saying is, or I'm just going to ignore that part exists at all. And then I'm going to keep the part I like and I'm going to not, adhere to the part that I don't like. Sure, people do that. They do it in all kinds of faiths. But we don't need to. There's no need for us to adhere to a faith that does not fit us. So if a model is not working for you, I encourage you to look at it and say, what is it about this model that is not working for me? And then to actually change. So, because if you believe in magic, right? The monotheisms don't believe in magic, but we do. Right. That's what makes us different. We believe in magic for the most part. And so if you believe in magic and you believe in myth and you believe in the power of your thoughts and your deeds, then why not have them all line up? Right. Yeah. And one of the great things about the book is that it causes us to sort of take received truths and look at where they came from and question them. Because as you mentioned, the pagan community is a subculture. But it's a subculture that was sort of birthed in the patriarchy, and it's not separate from that. And it's not immune from the kinds of distortions or mindsets that are part of that patriarchy. So yeah, shaking that up and looking at things and saying, how does my spirituality fit into this? What do I want it to be? Exactly. It's like, it kind of reminds me of the our bodies, ourselves of spirituality. It's like, take a look at your own damn cervix. It's in there. And this is how, Right. So perfect analogy. I love it. Yeah. You brought up the whole idea of like counterculture and subculture, and we have to remember alternative to means that it's from the thing. Right. Counter to means that it's from the thing. And, sub means it's under the thing. So, so like we are defined by dominant culture. Right. And it's not, that's not to some extent escapable, but it is examinable and it's fluid and it's something that we can work on. So it's like and in the areas where we examine, and that's what jailbreaking is, a tool for that, right? It's a tool for that process of examination, not just in your spiritual reality either. That's the thing. It's kind of like if the stealth thing about jailbreaking is that it's not actually a witchcraft book, it's a feminist book. Right. No, it's totally true. It's like, and yet it's so deeply a witchcraft book. And that's sort of like, we make our reality. We have an empowered relationship to the divine that, as you said, a lot of monotheistic religions, they don't see it that way to the same extent. We have magic. Right. And it's a book about making magic. So that's really different. Speaking of which, I think we should move on and look at how to use the workbook as an individual, as a group, online, stuff like that. So maybe that can be part 3 of our discussion. Yes. We'll come back and we'll talk about that in part 3. Okay. See you soon.